Hi, my name is Teresa Funke, and I'm an author, a speaker, and a writer's coach, back with some tips to help you get your writing career moving on the path that's right for you. Now, I have a little bit of a cold today, but I'm going to work through this because I want to talk to you about the two words that strike fear in the heart of every writer: writer's block. Now, you will occasionally hear an interview with a famous writer who will say he or she doesn't believe there is such a thing as writer's block. Well, I don't believe that's true. I believe even the most prolific writers experience writer's block. Maybe for them it only lasts a few hours, but I do believe they experience it. And for some writers, some that were very notable, writer's block may go on for years. But that doesn't keep them from producing a body of work that's impressive over their lifetime. So a lot of times the advice we will hear regarding writer's block is that we simply need to sit in our chairs and write our way through it. And that does sometimes work, but sometimes it doesn't. Now, partly it has to do with our expectations of ourselves as writers. Where did we ever get the impression, for example, that a real writer writes one book every year? Where did we get the impression that a real writer writes every single day, 7 days a week? If you knew somebody in another profession who worked every day, you would tell them they were a workaholic. So it partly has to do with the expectations and the pressure we put on ourselves. And that goes back to your goals. If you would like to reevaluate your goals for your writing, take a look at my earlier video on goal setting for writers, and also a look at the video on how long it really takes to write a book. Now, if you feel good about the expectations and the goals you have set for yourself, then we need to look at what really causes writer's block. A lot of people will lump writer's block together into one category, as if we all experience it in exactly the same way, which of course we don't. In fact, I have identified 7 different types of writer's block, and I would like to go over them with you now so that you can identify which one is affecting you and figure out how to best address it. Now, the first type of block is what I would call a story block. This is when there is something fundamentally wrong with the story itself. Now, if that is the case, why would you want to rush your way through that block? Why would you want to continue down a path that's clearly not working? A lot of times, story blocks come from one of two things. Either you haven't properly figured out your protagonist's motivation and what drives him through the story, or you didn't build enough conflict into the beginning of your story and you've stalled out in the middle. But it could also have to do with any other aspect of your story development. In this case, I would recommend that you step back, that you go back to your outline and make sure that you are still following the path that you believe is best for your story. You may need to go back to the original idea for the story and make sure that it's strong enough to sustain an entire book. Maybe you need to go back to your research. You might be missing an important piece of research that would actually help you form some plot ideas and move your story forward. You might want to try mind mapping or some other creative technique that's going to allow you to do some out-of-the-box thinking to take you to places in your story that you haven't considered yet. And the last thing you might want to do is brainstorming. In this case, you want to find a trusted friend or hire a writer's coach like me to do a brainstorming session. I've found brainstorming to be extremely helpful to a lot of my clients, especially in the areas of character development and plot. The second type of writer's block would be what I would call a skills block. That is when you are lacking the skills that you need to handle a story as big as the one that you have created. Now, this is never a comment on your ability. We call it a writer's journey after all, and every journey includes a lot of learning along the way. It could be that you need to step back and improve your skills in certain areas of writing in order to tackle a story that really works for you. The third type of writer's block is what I call a passion block. That is when you lack the proper passion for a story to continue it, but you're soldiering on because you think that's what a real writer would do. You might say to me, Teresa, if I was a good enough writer, I could figure out how to make this story work. Or you might say to me, I have to continue with this story. My writers group says it's the best story I've ever written. Or you might even say to me, but Teresa, this is the story I've wanted to write ever since I was a kid. How can I let that go now? But if you're not feeling the proper passion for a story, it's not going to work because you're not going to have the energy it takes to produce it well. We can only connect with the stories that we feel the most energetic and passionate about. So it's like I always tell my children, there is no such thing as a wasted experience. Even if you don't finish a story, you have learned something from the process of trying to write it, about yourself as a writer, or about your skills, or about the kind of story that you want to write. Now, this is not to say that you won't come back to that story at a later time if the passion returns for it. Quite often what will also happen is that we will take a piece or part of that story that we did like and work it into something else that we are writing. But even if you do give up on that story and never come back to it, know that you're not alone. All writers have a box of stories that we never finished, and that's not a bad thing. The most important thing is that you maintain your passion towards a story, and once it slips, let that story go. The fourth type of block is what I would call a direction block, or maybe a structure block. Now, this type of block takes a lot of strength and determination to get through. It could be that there's something wrong with the entire formatting of the book. Now, sometimes that will come as a surprise to you when someone points it out, but quite often we already know at some level that that's what's wrong with our book. But it's so intimidating to think of a massive rewrite, to think of starting over in a whole new place. Well, that's exactly what happened to me with my second book, Dancing in Combat Boots. It started out as an oral history collection, a non-fiction book. But my agent felt that we would have a better chance selling it if I rewrote the book entirely. Now, he didn't give me any direction as to how I should do that, and I was completely lost. To be honest with you, that was my lowest moment as a writer, and I very nearly gave up on that entire project. Then I landed on the idea of rewriting each of the oral history interviews as a short story. Now, it took me 2 years to do that, but once I landed on that new direction for the book and I felt like I was on the right track, I came to it with a new enthusiasm that allowed me to complete the story, and I'm extremely happy with the way that book turned out. So have the courage to look at your book from a structural point of view and say, the entire thing may need a massive rewrite. And trust me that you can do that, and it will be better off in the end. And your passion for the story will return once you feel you are on better footing, which will enable you to continue through the journey of completing that book. The fifth type of block is what I would call a boredom block. And this one strikes even the most advanced writers. This is when maybe you have become tired of the type of story you've been working on, the genre you've been working within. Or maybe you're tired of the series that you've been writing, or you're tired of being pigeonholed as a certain type of writer and you want to try something new. Well, this is when you should give yourself permission to break out of your usual genre and write something completely different. If you've always written for adults, for example, try writing something for children and see if that reinvigorates you. If you've always written fiction, try writing nonfiction, and you will find that you're going to learn some valuable skills around structure and control. Try writing poetry, and you'll learn some skills about imagery and word choice. In other words, break out of your usual mold and try something that's going to give you some spontaneity and allow you to explore some different areas of writing. The sixth type of block is actually one of the most difficult and one of the most common. This is what I call a psychological block, and you need to stop and figure out what is psychologically hanging you up in order to get past this. Now, maybe you had structured your story based on something that really happened to you in real life, and you're having a hard time getting away from the actual facts in order to let your story fly. Maybe your story was based on something that is currently in the news and now doesn't seem appropriate to write. Or another book came out similar to yours and you're afraid the market can't bear two books, and you let that fear keep you from continuing. Maybe it's something that your writers group told you, a criticism that is hanging you up. Maybe you've had a tragedy in your life recently, and you figured that writing would help you deal with that tragedy, but really what you need to do is take some time to get over that grief. It could be even that you are feeling some guilt about the time you are taking for your writing. You feel like it's taking you away from things that are more important. Whatever your psychological issue is, you need to own it. Don't belittle it. It's very real, and it is not a criticism of you. We all go through these psychological experiences, and we need to figure out how best to get through them. But you need to find that place where you feel confident in your work again. So get the support you need to get through this. And if you need to, take a break from the project so that you can come back to it when you are in a clear frame of mind. The last type of block is actually probably one of the most frightening. This one I would call an ideas block. This is when the ideas simply fail to flow. No matter how often we try to use our imagination, as we were told as children, we just can't come up with a new idea for a story. Well, it may be that you need to look outside of your own mind and look for inspiration in something that's going on currently in the world. In a book that might inspire you or give you ideas, in a song on the radio, in something you overhear in a coffee shop. Anything that's going to get those ideas generating again is a good thing. Now in this type of block, this is where we're often told, just sit down and write down whatever comes to mind. And sometimes that really does work. The action of just writing something gets us back into the flow of our work. But other times, it is our mind's way of telling us that we need a break, that maybe we're feeling a little overburdened by our project. Now think about how you feel at work when you're overburdened. What do? You take a vacation, right? You go experience new sights, sounds, and smells that stimulate your senses and give you energy again. Well, maybe that's what you need to do with your writing. Go have an adventure. Try something new. Get away from writing for a while and see if you can get some excitement back to bring back to the table with you. Take a little bit of a break to experience life and see if that helps you come back to your writing. Now, if you're afraid that you've worked really hard to set up a writing schedule and you don't want to lose that, then what you might want to do is take your break within your schedule. Use that time to read some great books on writing, or to read really good books written in your genre. Learn from the masters and pick up inspiration by reading really good books. That can also help you get past this type of block. Now again, if you want to maintain that writing schedule, which I really recommend, try writing something just for fun. Try journaling if you've never journaled, just to keep you in the habit of writing. But I do recommend that you set a deadline when you are going to revisit your goals for your writing and your motivation for your writing. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you have to set a deadline where you're going to say, on this date, I will start writing again, because that may feel too restrictive and put too much pressure on you. But I am saying you want to set a deadline for having another serious conversation with yourself about how you feel about your writing and where it's going, and what you can do to kickstart your interest in writing again. Why then is our writer's block such a terrible fear for writers? Well, it's because we're afraid it means that we're not good enough to be writers, or that we're going to have to scrap a project that we care a great deal about, or that the ideas never really will start flowing again. But the fact of the matter is, if you were meant to be a writer, then writer's block is a speed bump on your journey. It is not a roadblock. I guarantee you will get through your writer's block and you will continue down your path as a writer. You have to trust that if you believe this is your destiny. But I would also like to take this moment to do a get real moment in this video and to ask you if you really are writing because writing is what you want for yourself. Or are you writing because somebody told you had a good story and you should write it down? Are you writing because when you were 10 years old you decided you wanted to be a writer and you feel like you should pursue that? Are you writing because you don't know what else to do with your life right now? In other words, are you writing for the right reasons? If not, there is no shame in taking a break from your writing for even a long time and deciding whether or not you really want to come back to this at this stage in your life. Writing is not for the faint of heart, and you want to come at it with your whole self. But it doesn't mean that just because you don't feel like writing now, you never will. I have a client, for example, who wrote when she was younger. She is now in her mid-70s and just came out with her first book, which I love, by the way. I think for a long period of time she thought maybe she wasn't intended to finish a book. But now she gets to call herself an author, and she's very proud of that. Sometimes it's about timing, sometimes it's about passion, and sometimes it is that writing really isn't for you. If that's the case, why would you want to do something that gives you no pleasure? Come back to it when you are ready to feel it with your whole heart. So think of it this way. What would a child do with blocks? Well, he'd build on them, of course. So maybe we need to take a more childlike approach to our writer's block. Maybe we need to relax, play, have a little fun, be bold, be daring, be creative. And in the end, maybe your writer's block will turn out to be a tool to help you build something better, as it was for me with my book Dancing in Combat Boots. Now, if you decide that you need some help with your writer's block, that you want to do a brainstorming session, or you need to talk through this block with someone who can truly help you, consider giving me a call. My website is shown below, teresafunke.com, and I've helped a lot of clients work past difficulties they didn't think they would be able to overcome. I would be happy to talk to you about your work. In the meantime, keep working and keep moving forward. Writer's block or no, this is your path.